And we're live with tonight's Panther-Lair Show. Tuesday night live stream, the podcast on Wednesday, as we do every week. Appreciate you tuning in on the live stream. Already got some people checking in. Appreciate you checking out the podcast during the week. And, boy, we've certainly got a lot to talk about. So it's going to be one of those interesting nights. Sorry, distracted here at the start of my podcast with a special guest off screen who's leaving the room now. But, yeah, this is going to be one of those podcasts where we've got plenty of to talk about. You know, last Tuesday night, we were sitting here. What did we even talk about last Tuesday night? Was that when I did the position rankings on last week's podcast? Did I do the position rankings on last week? And we talked about whether the quarterbacks were third or defensive ends were first or the safeties were second or anything like that. I think that's what we talked about last week on the podcast. A week later, it was a little bit more interesting. It's funny because a day after that last podcast, I'm not going to say all you-know-what broke loose. We got to keep the language clean on this week's podcast. But things certainly got more interesting. Wednesday, Thursday, and then today, Tuesday, we've seen a little bit of recruiting action. You know the news already. If you're tuning into this podcast, you're watching the live stream on Tuesday night, you're listening to the podcast on Wednesday, you know all the exciting news. You know everything that's happened. So we're not going to pretend like we're breaking news on this podcast. But yeah, 5 commitments, 4 football commitments, 1 basketball commitment. They were all big commitments, I would say, in a variety of ways. We're going to talk about all of those commitments on this podcast, what it means for recruiting on the football side and the basketball side. And yeah, it was a big run. And it was something I didn't necessarily see it coming. I think you knew the basketball commitment was coming at some point. Had an inkling that there might be some football commitments on the way, but maybe nothing, not quite like the way it snowballed with 3 on Wednesday, 1 on Thursday, and then the basketball commitment on Tuesday. And where do we start? I kind of feel like, I want to talk about the football kids. And if you're on the live stream, you see we've got the photos going of a football slideshow going right there. But, the news of Tuesday, this day, the day where we're watching the day that we're taping this podcast. The news of Tuesday was on the basketball side. And that's William Jefferson, 4-star forward out of Erie McDowell. Committed to Pitt, expected to commit to Pitt. Yeah, Pitt was the favorite for Jefferson for a long time, but he's a top prospect, and there was some tough competition for him. And, we could talk back and forth about what the pandemic, how it played into this and the emergency dead period that I've talked about so many times, and, what kind of impact that might have had on William Jefferson, his recruitment. But, the end result is that he's going to Pitt and that he committed to Pitt on Tuesday and he's going to play for the Panthers. And this is a huge pickup for Jeff Capel, and it's a huge pickup for Pitt. This is the best recruit as a prospect that Jeff Capel has signed since he got to Pitt. Number 75 recruit in the country is William Jefferson, number 13. I forget if we have him on Rivals.com as a small forward or a power forward, but he's a forward. He's a wing, really. I'd kind of be surprised if we ever see him playing the 4. I think, maybe in some of the smaller lineups, maybe he'll line up as a 4. Not that he's small. It's just I think his game translates probably better as a wing, as a 2 or a 3. And, mostly probably a 3 would seem to be his game. And this was a big-time commitment. This is a big boost for Jeff Capel's program. Not necessarily that at a moment when he needed a boost. I think it's just always good to get a good commitment and get a good recruit. And there's a lot of angles to Jefferson and his decision to commit to Pitt. You start with, where do you start? What's the most, I guess you start on the court. How does William Jefferson affect Pitt on the court? And like I said, I think he probably fits in as a 3. I think he could take minutes at the 2. Probably one thing, we have to get ahead of right off the bat, because a lot of the reaction on Tuesday, and understandably so, about Jefferson committing was, wow, this could be the difference between the NIT and the NCAA next season. I don't know about that. I think William Jefferson is a great prospect. I think he's got a lot of potential. I think he's got a really high ceiling. I think he can be really good for Pitt for a couple of years, for a number of years. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time. One thing which has been talked about a lot is the fact that he is young. He's signing, out of high school, but he's a young high school player. He reclassified from the 2021 class to the 2020 class. He was already young for the 2021 class. I think he's still 16. I don't think he's even turned 17 yet. He just finished his junior year of high school. So he's coming into Pitt as a young person. Now, he's not necessarily a young player. He's played basketball for a long time. He's always played up a level, and he's always played against good competition. He's always held his own and done well against good competition. I think his family and he felt he was ready to move into college. I think Jeff Capel felt he was ready to move into college physically. He was ready to get into the college game and play in the ACC. But I also think it's probably wise to be measured in your expectations for William Jefferson right off the bat, just because he's young and it could take some time. Now, I think he's going to contribute as a freshman. I'm not talking about a red shirt or anything like that. I think he's going to contribute as a freshman. I think he's going to get minutes as a freshman. We talked to Corey Evans from Rivals.com, the national basketball analyst, to kind of break down the impact of Jefferson committing to Pitt. And he said, you look at 10, 15 minutes a game, something like that, which would be, I think, a good contribution for William Jefferson when he gets to Pitt. It's probably wise not to go too overboard with your expectation of what he can do once he gets here. That said, he's a really good prospect, and he's got a really high ceiling. He's got great athleticism, and physically he is mature. He is a big kid. He's just young. So what I think he does for Pitt in this upcoming season, the 2020-2021 season, whenever that may be played, and hopefully it's played when it's supposed to be played, but whenever that may be played, I think he provides minutes off the bench. I think he shows flashes of his potential. I think he has a couple games where he looks like he's really breaking out. And I think he fits into the rotation, whether, however that rotation goes. And I was kind of jotting down different lineups they could roll with. I mean, I think, you're probably looking, right, I think the common expectation, and reasonably so, that starting lineup's going to be Xavier Johnson, Ethiel Horton, Audice Toney, Justin Champagnie, and Terrell Brown. I mean, I think that's probably going to be your starting five, maybe with some flexibility or some rotation at that center position. And I mean, rotation on of starters, not obviously there's going to be a rotation in a game. Nobody's playing 40 minutes. But then once you get into the reserves, it gets interesting. I mean, I would got to think that your second best point guard on the team, your number 2 point guard at least, is Ethiel Horton. So, he's probably the guy who takes over the ball handling duties when Xavier Johnson goes out. But then you get flexibility around who steps in at the 2 when Horton has to play the point. And, Femi Odekel, the freshman coming in, William Jefferson potentially could play there. I think maybe Gerald Drumgoole could work as a 2 from time to time. That's still a little bit of a tricky spot. I think you're still going to get a ton of minutes for your top 2 guards, which are Johnson and Horton, until you're comfortable with Femi Odekel and, potentially Jefferson or potentially Drumgoole taking some of those minutes, because you're still light on guards. The problem they had last year with guard depth is still an issue this year. Are still going to be an issue this year, unless there's some kind of surprise that comes either out of the transfer market or the grad transfer market this summer, which I can't rule out. I mean, look, if the NCAA decides that they're going to go to a one-time free pass on immediate eligibility for transfers, I think you're going to see transfers this summer, even if it seems late in the game to have guys transferring. But I think it's going to happen, and probably happen in droves if the NCAA decides to allow that right now, allow that this year. And so potentially you could get another guard to come in that way, and it wouldn't even have to be a grad transfer. It could be on the traditional transfer market, which would be decidedly non-traditional if they allow this one-time free eligibility. So you're still kind of light on guards. You still have to figure out what you're going to get and hope that one of these guys, Odekel or whoever, can develop and step in and take those minutes to provide some relief for Johnson and Horton, or if one of those guys gets into foul trouble or is just not playing well. Because we talked about this a lot in the past. We talked about it a lot during the season, talked about it a lot after the season, that Jeff Capel was stuck because if a guy got hurt or a guy got in foul trouble or a guy just wasn't playing well. And I'm talking just at the guard positions. I mean, it went from minimal depth to no depth instantly. I mean, when Ryan Murphy got hurt, you had the walk-on playing, and when the walk-on got hurt, you didn't have anybody. It was Johnson and McGowan's, and if one of those guys got in foul trouble, well, they're playing with 2 fouls in the first half, or they're playing with 3 fouls in the first half, because there was just nobody else. I mean, there just wasn't, and there wasn't any depth. And they added some guards. If you count Horton coming in, after sitting out for a year, and if you count, and then you talk about Femi Odekel, but they also lost 2 guards when they lost McGowan's and Murphy. So you're still in the same numbers situation you were in a year ago at guard, and that's going to be tricky. So no matter what, you're going to be watching to see what develops here, because this class is not a guard class. There's 5 recruits in this class, but they're not guards. They're not. They're not guys who are coming in to play the point or play the 2 with really. So then you move on. You've got Audi's Tony is your 3. Gerald Drumgoole can play there. William Jefferson can play there. I think you get good contributions out of that group. I mean, Tony's obviously going to be your bell cow at that position, and the same way at the 4 with Justin Champagnie, and you see who kind of fits in behind him. I mean, I think they have a variety of lineups they can go with. They can play in a couple of different ways there, I think, depending on what kind of lineup they want to have. And then at center, you have Terrell Brown and Abdul Kareem Koulibaly and John Hughley and, the other freshmen. I mean, Noah Collier and Max Madison. One of those guys could be more of a 4 or more, general post kind of players. So you've restocked, I think, the depth certainly at the 5 and to some extent at the 3 and the 4, but the 1 and 2 are really where depth still is a little lacking. But nevertheless, just a brief sort of sidetrack there into the current roster and depth chart as it looks, where they've got 12 guys committed right now, or 12 scholarships accounted for on the roster for this coming season. And, Jeff Capel played last year with only 12 scholarships. He didn't use the 13th scholarship. They had an open spot, and that was brought up more than a few times when Pitt got into that depth trouble at guard, that, boy, it would have been nice if they could have grabbed another guard, someone late in the process, to try to fill that last spot and add to the depth. But the way it looks right now, they could be in position to do the same thing. I don't see Capel being in a real rush to use that other scholarship unless the right opportunity presented itself. And again, that would probably have to be a transfer guard, I would think. Either graduate or, traditional transfer guard. So, that's kind of where you're at. But again, that's a sidetrack from the main point of the story, what we're talking about here, which is William Jefferson committing to Pitt on Tuesday. Let's take a quick sidetrack over here to the YouTube comments. This is always, I always say, this is the great thing about the YouTube live stream of the podcast, is that you can get in the comment section and ask questions and have conversations and, get in on the discussion. You know what I mean? I'm sitting here talking. Well, you can respond to what I'm saying. And Eric Rogers says, the Hoops team is still a year away from being very competitive. Football, everything hinges on that offense. Still need a solid offense to win in college football. I'm worried we won't have one. Thanks. Eric says the Hoops team is still a year away from being very competitive. I think they do still need to fill out that guard depth a little bit. This team, as it currently stands, with your starting 5 of Johnson, Horton, Tony, Champagnie, somebody, whether it's Brown or Koulibaly or Hughley, whoever gets that center spot, with your 1 through 4, you could be competitive in the ACC. I really believe that. If Ethiel Horton is everything they've made him out to be, you can be very competitive in the ACC. And they're talking that kid up a lot. I've talked about this a bunch of times before. But if Ethiel Horton lives up to expectations, you pair him with Johnson, and Tony and Champagnie continue to progress. If Tony makes a jump from year 2 to year 3 like he made from year 1 to year 2, if Champagnie makes a jump from year 1 to year 2, I mean, those guys are legit ACC players. And you pair them with Johnson and Horton, and you've got, you can compete in this conference 1 through 4. Are you going to win 10 games in the conference? I don't know. Are you going to, win 3 games in the ACC tournament? I don't know. But you should be able to field a legitimate NIT caliber roster, minimum. You just have to keep filling that out. And then you need some of these young guys. I mean, you need Will Jeffers to develop. You need Gerald Drumgold to develop. You need John Hughley to develop. You need Collier and Madison, all these guys. You need Koulibaly for 2 years from now to be in a strong position. And that's, I don't want to say, oh, this team shouldn't even think about the NCAAs this coming season. If they miss the NCAA tournament this coming season, I'm not going to count this year as a failure. I think they should be. I think there should be points in this coming season where we talk about this team as being on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. I think their name should be one of those teams that pops up consistently as being a bubble team, and I think they should be pretty firmly in the NIT. I think they should get in the NIT pretty comfortably. That's my April 28th, expectations for a season that is supposed to start like 7 months from now. Who knows if or when they're actually going to play. And Eric, also in his comments said everything with the football team hinges on the offense. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the preacher on that one, Eric, because I've been saying that 100 times. I've been saying that over and over again. And it's true. It's all going to come back to that offense and what they're able to do. We'll talk about that offense in a second. Before I take the next question on YouTube, I got to get out something cold because I'm getting a little parched here from talking for a little while. We got, we've been with Voodoo for a little while here. The last couple of weeks, Voodoo's been hooking us up, and we got the Condescending Dough. That's what it's called, Condescending Dough. It's sour IPA. And if you listen to the podcast before, you've heard me talk about beers before. I got to say, I've said this before. I'm not big into sours. I don't usually seek them out. I don't usually order at a bar. I don't buy it at the distributor. It's just not my particular flavor. But this Condescending Dough from Voodoo, I mean, I'm not lying. It's really good. It's sour IPA. And yeah, I mean, it's sour, but it's hoppy too. And it's is really tasty. And Voodoo, if you're a Pitt fan, you should be supporting Voodoo because they're Pitt fans. They support the podcast. They support the site. They support Pitt. They're big Pitt people up there in Meadville. I don't know if everybody in Meadville is, but the people of Voodoo are. So if you're looking for something different to drink this weekend, get some Voodoo. Get it from your local distributor. Get it from, order it from them. Wherever you get good beer, go to Voodoo. That's the spot. Rolling down here in the YouTube comments in question, Sam Smallwood says, do you expect Capel to fill that final scholarship spot? They could really use another guard for depth, which was an issue last season too. Sam, you read my mind, man. I think you posted that question probably before I even said that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that guard depth was an issue last year, and it's going to be an issue this year too with the numbers the way they are. Unless you get a transfer guard who can come in and help right away, you're going to have depth issues at guard, just like you did a year ago. You're absolutely right, Sam. And for now, I think they'll hold on to that scholarship spot. When we talked to Corey Evans from Rivals.com to break down William Jefferson's commitment, I also asked him, hey, what do you think they do with that last scholarship? And he said, look, I think they hold on to it for now. I think they just walk into the summer holding that scholarship and see what kind of pops up on the transfer market. So I kind of agree with Corey. I think Jeff Capel is more than willing to take that scholarship and see what develops rather than use it right now. And so I think, by June, that scholarship spot will still be open. Will it still be open by August? I don't know. That depends on a number of factors for sure. Brock Madonic says, what's your expectations for this year's basketball team estimating win total? I don't know. I have a hard time estimating win totals because there's a million factors. I mean, I think you look at it, and I mean, if you want to set a bar for yourself, you want to shoot for getting as close to 10 wins in the conference as you can. The overall record, whatever, 18, 20, sure, 20 wins would be great. You want to go from 6 to get as close to 10 as you can. And that is honestly just a number off the top of my head, thinking about what it represents and the amount of success that I think a team like Pitt should be capable of. I'm not looking at the rosters of the other teams or what their schedule matrix is supposed to be or who they're going to play or where they're going to play them or any of those kinds of things. I'm just saying that where Jeff Capel should have this program in year 3, they should be pushing to go 500 in the ACC. 10 wins in conference play. I mean, I think that's what you need to shoot for. And if you fall short of that, it's going to be a little disappointing. And if you go over it, I'm going to say that you overachieved a little bit. You had a really successful season. You'll probably be in the NCAA tournament, to be honest. I mean, if you end up, if you win, if you go better than 500 in the conference, in the ACC, you're going to be in the NCAA tournament, I think. Royce Beacom said, without any on-campus visits except Pitt, that had to help in the recruitment of William Jefferson. And, it's interesting to see, it was interesting to get a sense of how the dead period changed things for William Jefferson. I mean, I think he wanted to take as many official visits as he possibly could this spring. But when, the pandemic caused the NCAA to declare an emergency dead period, which canceled all spring visits, unofficial or official. You couldn't have any in-person contact, any in-person recruiting contact. Once the NCAA did that, I think it did change the dynamics of Jefferson's recruitment. Now, he still did a lot of these virtual tours. He did a lot of the virtual visits and FaceTimes. He talked to a lot of coaching staffs throughout that part of the process. But being on Pitt's campus a bunch of times helped a lot. Now, Pitt wasn't the only school that he visited. He visited other schools that he was looking at, before the quarantine and the emergency dead period. But having, I'm not going to say it was the difference in him picking Pitt versus picking another school. I still am of the mind that if he had gone on 5 other official visits, he still would have gone to Pitt. I think this is where he's been leaning and headed for a long time. But it probably helped a little bit. I think it probably helped. Jason Martell says, Jeffers had one of the best recruitment videos you'll find. Very impressive kid and very impressive family. And I agree. I think William Jeffers and his family had a plan for recruiting. Not necessarily for like the commitment in the video and all that stuff. But I think that they had a plan on how they wanted to handle. I mean, you would actually have to flip the pages back a few years. I think they had a plan on how they wanted to handle Williams' high school career, leading into his recruitment and then his college career, because it's not like the plan to graduate early wasn't just hatched 6 months ago or a year ago. This is a plan that was put into place and put into action 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. It's been, this is something they've been working toward. And so I think, and there's another comment, Sam Smallwood says he comes off as one of the most high character kids I've seen in college sports. And I think that is from his family. I think William Jeffers and his family had a very concrete plan and idea of how they wanted to handle everything involved here. From his high school career to his early graduation to his recruitment to his commitment and where they're going to go to college, all of that stuff. And I think they executed it. And I think you see the fruits of that preparation, I guess, in how everything has been handled and how it's been done. Yeah, it was an impressive commitment video. If you haven't checked it out, it's like a 5-minute video. But William Jeffers talks a lot in it, and it was pretty impressive, I got to say. Nicholas Temperio says Ethiel Horton's play might be a bigger factor in the NIT or the NCAA tournament than Jeffers next year, and I absolutely agree with that, Nicholas. I think if you talk about why Pitt will make the NIT or will make the NCAA tournament, a whole bunch of it's going to come down to Ethiel Horton and whether he lives up to the expectations that Pitt has talked about. And, the coaches, the players, people around the program, people who've watched this team, they talk about Ethiel Horton being, maybe the best guard on the team last year. And again, it's just in practice, but maybe the best guard on the team. And so I think he Yeah, if he lives up to that, then they're going to have, their chances of making the NCAA tournament are going to increase significantly. Brock Madonic says, who do you believe is the most unknown freshman for the 2020 basketball class? I really like what I've seen from Noah Collier. Yeah, Collier looks good. I mean, John Hughley's gotten a ton of press. He's gotten a ton of hype, and he had a great senior season playing in Cleveland. But as of Tuesday, I think he's getting overshadowed, and everybody gets overshadowed by William Jefferson, who's the 4-star recruit, the number 75 prospect in the country. And Jefferson is going to have the spotlight on him in this recruiting class, but Hughley, I still think, is probably he's not unknown, Brock. So, I mean, I'm not going to say he's the most unknown freshman, but I think if you look at the freshman who's going to make the biggest contribution out of this class, I think it's going to be Hughley. I don't think any of these guys is going to have a Justin Champagnie type impact where he's in the starting lineup and he's playing as many minutes as he did and has those kinds of games. The way Champagnie did. I don't think anybody from this class is going to do that, largely because I think your starting rotation is more or less set. Now, Hughley could be that guy. Hughley could be the one who ultimately unseats Terrell Brown and skips over Abdul Kareem Coulibaly and moves himself into the starting lineup at center. I don't know. It's hard for me to project. I hate to put a starting job on a freshman right away. And I think there's competition there. I think Abdul Kareem Coulibaly is going to be a lot better as a sophomore than he was as a freshman. I don't know what Terrell Brown is going to be. We've talked about him before on this podcast, and I don't know. I don't know if he's ever going to become the player that he has the ability to be, the potential to be. I don't know. But Hughley could push, and I think he'll probably end up being the most productive and make the biggest contribution out of any of the guys in this freshman class. Scrolling through the comments here. Let's see. Leon Moore 23 says Gerald Drumgoole will be the most improved player next year. He never got over that ankle injury. I agree to some extent there, Leon. Not to some extent. I agree to a large extent with what you're saying. I feel like as the season went on, people were really ragging on. I feel like those two are interchangeable, bagging and ragging. But people were really giving Gerald Drumgoole a hard time and criticizing him and saying that he, looked out of place, that they hoped he transferred. He doesn't look very good. He doesn't seem like a very good player. And I feel like it got forgotten that the guy missed some significant time with an injury, that he got hurt and sat out a good deal. And that I think that's not unimportant. For a freshman to miss time at the beginning of his first year of college basketball with an injury that he probably never really recovered from 100%. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not closing the book on Gerald Drumgoole just yet. I think there were a lot of people who were optimistic about his potential when he came into Pitt and thought he could be a good player. And yeah, he didn't have a great freshman season, but I think you can explain that or rationalize it a bit with the injury and at least wait and see what his second year looks like. Let's see. Down here. Tony Boff asks, where they stand with a few of these other recruits that are left in the 2020 recruiting class. I think they've got their toes in a few different pools there. I kind of don't think they're going to end up with any of those guys. I don't really. I just don't think they're going to land another 2020 recruit, but I could be wrong. I mean, basketball is such a different kind of animal. It changes really quickly, and there are more. There are options and opportunities for these guys to do some different things other than go to college. Not necessarily the guys that Pitt is right after, but it's hard to tell. At this point, my sense is they're probably not going to get another freshman, another high school recruit to come in and play. At this point, my sense is if they do anything with that 13 scholarship, they will be, it will be used on a transfer. That's my thought. But again, things change quickly, particularly they change quickly in recruiting, and they particularly change quickly in basketball recruiting. Colin Towle asks, who's more successful in the next 5 years, basketball or football? Both sports have a good chance to be among the tops in the ACC. This is an interesting question, Colin. And, I'm not going to waste a lot of time on the semantics of successful. How do we define successful? I mean, we know what successful is. We know what counts as success in each of these sports, and we'll be able to look 5 years from now at these next 5 seasons, and we'll be able to determine, it'll be pretty clear who was more successful. And I don't know what the answer to that question is. I really don't. I think football is poised to have a really successful season this year, but if we're talking about the next 5 years, a whole heck of a lot of it is going to depend on how they rebuild this team, because they're losing just about everybody from the defense after this season. Just about everybody's gone. And so if they've recruited well and evaluated well and developed those players well, those younger guys who are going to be on the field in reserve roles this season, then football can keep it up. Because I think the offense has the potential to trend in a good direction. The defense is going to have to be rebuilt in a hurry for the 2021 season when you're breaking in a brand new starting quarterback for the first time in a few years. So I like football's potential this year. I think football will be more successful in 2021 or in 2020 than basketball. But if we're talking 5 years, I'm not sure. I don't know, because we have to see how Pat Narduzzi rebuilds this defense and some big chunks of the roster. And it's not unique to have to rebuild like that, but we'll have to see how he does with that. And that, because that's going to determine how successful they are in the next few years. Let me see here. I think another thing that stands out to me about this William Jefferson commitment, I don't know if Pitt fans were looking for validation about Jeff Capel. I think I feel like the vast majority of Pitt fans were really happy with the Jeff Capel hiring. They understood the challenges that he inherited, the difficult situation that he inherited, and they appreciate what he's done to try and dig Pitt out of the hole. And you talk about a guy who's doing the heavy lifting. Jeff Capel's doing the heavy lifting here more than any other individual. On the administrative side, on the coaching side, Jeff Capel's doing the heavy lifting himself. Okay, he is everything that Pitt basketball has become is on Jeff Capel, is a product of Jeff Capel's effort and energy, whatever you want to put it on, whatever you want to call it. He's done it. He's done the heavy lifting here. And I think most Pitt fans appreciate the job he's done, understand the job he's done, understand why it, how difficult it was, and, think he's doing a good job. Go from, 3 ACC wins in his first year, 6 his second year, with the potential really for a bunch more. There's always a vocal minority that's going to be critical, even of a coach like Capel, who seems, by all accounts, to be the right coach for Pitt. There's always going to be a vocal minority. But I think for the vast majority, they think he's the right guy and he's doing a good job. But when you get a recruit like William Jefferson, when you get the number 75 prospect in the country, even if he's a local kid, which doesn't really count for much because we've seen plenty of local kids leave the area. But when you get a recruit of William Jefferson's profile, it serves as an extra reinforcement that what he's doing is right, that what he's selling and the future he's selling resonates with the recruits. And I think if you're a fan, you look at it and you say, if you see it resonating with William Jefferson, or John Hughley, or Justin Champagny, or Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's, and we won't even go back that far. It's really about this class and it's about Jefferson. When you see it as a fan, when you see Capel's message and his vision for the program resonating with a recruit like that, I don't know how you can't be really encouraged. Because look, William Jefferson has a whole hell of a lot more riding on the future success of Pitt's basketball program than you do. It means a lot to you. It's meant a lot to you for a long time. You're emotionally invested in the basketball program, but his future is riding on the Pitt basketball program. And his future is riding on the success of the Pitt basketball program. His future is dependent upon Pitt basketball getting successful, being successful. And more to the point, it's dependent on Jeff Capel coaching him into the position he wants to be, which is playing in the professional basketball. And so I think you look at it as a fan, you look at it from the outside and you say, okay, if it's good enough for him, if it's good enough for somebody who literally his future is dependent upon Jeff Capel being the right guy for the job, I think as a fan, you got to sit back and be like, man, that's good enough for me. That works. That works. If he convinced William Jefferson and his family, this is not just a 16-year-old kid who was convinced here. It's a whole family. Then I think you can buy into it too. I think that's just my take. And again, I don't know if most Pitt fans needed any reinforcement on that front. I don't think they needed additional. I don't know what the right word is. I don't know if they needed to be reassured about Jeff Capel. Well, they got a little bit of reassurance on Tuesday when William Jefferson said, hey, man, I'm buying in. I believe in it. So that was a big commitment for Jeff Capel. Let's get the last couple comments here on the basketball side before we switch over to football recruiting, because there was a lot. Let me see here. Leon Moore 23 says Pitt basically got Mr. Ohio and Mr. PA in hoops. That's true with John Hughley and William Jefferson. Mr. Ohio Hughley and Mr. PA Jefferson. Let me see. And then Leon follows up and says Capel's the man. It takes time to make a relationship with these recruits. You see that now. Once he gets ahead and knows these kids, he's in tune with them more than most coaches. They love him. And yeah, Jeff Capel is a legit he's a legit recruiter, and he came to Pitt with that reputation. And I guess if there was anything people were really questioning about Capel, there were questions about why Xavier Johnson and Trey McGowan's maybe didn't improve as much as you would have liked to have seen in their sophomore year. And, some of that's going to fall back on the coach. But I think if there were questions people had, it was probably about Capel maybe not recruiting better. The 2019 class, I wrote down a lot of these recruiting things. That 2019 class didn't have any 4-star recruits in it. Didn't have, had one kid in the top 150, and that was Gerald Drumgold. He was recruit number 136 overall. Now, Champagny was not ranked in the top 150, according to Rivals. And so I think people looked at his recruiting, got really encouraged when Capel first showed up, and he got Xavier Johnson, and he got Trey McGowan's, and he got Audis Toney. He was really encouraged by that. But then his second year didn't really follow that path. It didn't trend upward, at least according to the rankings, right? They didn't get any top 100 recruits. Only got one top 150 recruit. Didn't get any 4-star recruits. They got, McGowan's was number 83 in the country. He was a 4-star prospect in the 2018 class. They didn't get anybody in 2019. And so I think there were some concerns about that. Even for people who were really diehard and sold on Jeff Capel, there were some concerns about that. And, here we go. I think this helps. Getting Jefferson, Hughley in this class, particularly Jefferson, but also Hughley. Hughley's another 4-star recruit. He's 101 in the country. Number 101 is where he's ranked nationally. And so I think getting both of these guys in this class is a little bit of a reminder that, hey, this guy's pretty good as a recruiter. He just happened to take over a program that won 0 ACC games the year he arrived and won 3 his first season. And it's going to take some time. Even if you're a great recruiter, it's going to take a little bit of time to recruit around that. It's still not. You have to establish what Pitt basketball is going to be, and he hadn't established it yet, and he still hasn't. He's got to establish it on the court, and then I think you'll see more of those results follow, because then his natural recruiting ability will have success to back it up. You know what I mean? We'll have results to back it up. And when you combine that natural recruiting ability with the results, that's when you really succeed. And, you know, you'd like to think that this upcoming season we'll see some more results that Capel is able to use on the recruiting trail, and then you really get that synergy of results and recruiting prowess. We'll see if it ends up happening. All right, on the football side, speaking of recruiting prowess, there's this guy. You might have heard of him. His name's Chris Baty. He's Pitt's wide receivers coach. And when you talk about guys who know their business in terms of recruiting, his guy's pretty good. Chris Baty was hired at Pitt because of his recruiting prowess. I mean, he was known as, he's a good receivers coach, but whatever. He's a great recruiter. This is what we were told. And we saw it right away. Baty was hired last, January, I think it was, maybe earlier, December. He talked at one of the signing days. He might have talked at the February signing day, so he might have been hired in January. Because I think Sean Watson and Kevin Sherman were fired after the Sun Bowl. So Chris Baty gets hired as receivers coach in January. And he comes in, and the talk is about how good of a recruiter he is. And you get the first indication that spring when he got all these really good underclassmen from Virginia to visit. Now, he didn't end up signing anybody from Virginia. I don't think in the 2020 class. I don't think they. I'd have to go back and look. But what he did, though, is he served as the point man, the main recruiter for Jordan Addison and Jalen Barden, those two big receiver recruits. And Addison and Barden both got late interest from other schools. Addison was really getting pushed pretty hard by a few schools were really coming after him. And Chris Baty, I think, showed what he can do when he held on to those guys. In the meantime, he got a commitment last fall from Rodney Hammond, a running back out of Virginia. And then this past week, he got two from Virginia and really started flexing his muscles a little bit. Trevor Gan Stevenson was the first recruit to commit last week. He committed on Wednesday. He was number one out of the 4 football recruits who committed. Stevenson was number 1. He's a defensive end out of Hampton, Virginia. A really tall, lanky outside linebacker who will add weight and grow into a defensive end in college. There's a bit of projection going on here by Charlie Partridge, Pitt's defensive line coach. They're looking at it, him and the defensive staff are looking at it, and they believe in the potential that Stevenson has and what he can grow into. It's also going to be a really big class, so if you have a couple of these guys who might be a bit of a project, who might be able, you're projecting a little bit more than you normally do, you can have a few of those guys in a big class, which is what this is going to be for Pitt. It's going to be a larger size class. But Baty was the key man there. He was the point man on Stevenson's commitment. And then later that day, the third commitment of the day, we'll skip over number 2. We'll come back to him. Third commitment of the day was Miles Alston, a wide receiver out of Virginia Beach, which is Chris Baty's hometown. It's where he's from. He's got connections there. He coached with one of Alston's coaches at Ocean Lakes High School. They were both on staff at another high school in Virginia Beach back in the day. And Alston was a big-time get. Alston's a really good playmaking wide receiver. He's a smaller guy who would start off in the slot, but potentially could learn some of the outside spots. He's a playmaker, plain and simple. Get him the ball, put the ball in his hands, and he can make plays. And now you've seen Chris Baty pull in 3 kids out of Virginia. Plus, another commitment on Wednesday was from Jaden Bradley, a wide receiver at DeMatha High School in Hyattsville, Maryland, a big-time program. And Baty was an important figure in Bradley's commitment. Bradley's a really interesting recruit. He's 6'4", 190. Looks really good on tape, but he's only got 1 year of tape playing wide receiver. He was a quarterback throughout his career prior to last season. He transferred to DeMatha and switched positions and started playing wide receiver. And so I think that slowed his recruitment down a little bit because he only has 1 year of experience at the position. But Chris Baty liked what he saw. Again, served as kind of like with Jordan Addison and Jalen Barden last year, played an important role in recruiting Bradley and ended up landing him. So you get another commitment for Baty there. And then The fourth commitment was Terrence Rankle, an offensive lineman out of Massillon, Ohio, Washington High School. He committed on Thursday. Chris Baty not involved in this one, so we're not going to continue on the Baty praise train here. But Rankle's a big offensive lineman. Pitt's going to need 3 or 4 of those guys in this class, and Rankle is a guy who is probably a tackle, but could potentially play guard or even center. Dave Borbely, Pitt's offensive line coach, has talked to him about playing center. So it was a real run for the football coaches, and they went from 3 commitments on Wednesday morning to 7 by Thursday night. And all 4 look like pretty good additions. You get 2 wide receivers in Miles Alston and Jaden Bradley. You get a defensive end in Trevor Gan Stevenson, second one in the class for Pitt, joining Nakai Johnson from West Mifflin. And then you get your first offensive line recruit in the class in Terrence Rankle. This class is coming together in a really interesting way. Really interesting. Right now, the biggest star power is Nakai Johnson, who's big time out of West Mifflin. Pitt's going to have to fight tooth and nail. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I don't think he wants to go anywhere. I think he's tight with Dayon Hayes, who signed in the 2020 class. I think he's close with some other guys in the WPIAL in this 2021 class who Pitt has a really good chance of getting. And so, and he's got a lot of connections at Pitt. He was their first commitment in the class. He committed last July or June. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. Schools are going to push for him hard until his name is signed on a letter of intent to go to Pitt. And so Pitt is going to have to battle to keep him in the class. But he's worth it because he's a big-time defensive end prospect, just like Dayon Hayes was in last year's class. And so you got a great foundation there. Then you add in some of these Virginia playmakers, Rodney Hammond, the running back, and Miles Alston, the wide receiver. You add in a raw, but again, the kind of guy you can project because you're taking a big class in Jaden Bradley at wide receiver, and then Trevor Gan Stevenson, same thing at defensive end. If you have a big class like Pitt is going to have this year, where you're looking at 23, 24 recruits, I think is really where I see this thing ending up. You can take a couple guys who are not necessarily finished products right now. And look, coming out of high school, who's a finished product? Nobody's a finished product. But you understand what I'm saying. These guys are a little more raw, a little bit more of a projection. But you can take a few of them. You don't want your whole class to be that way, but if you're only taking 16, 17 guys, if you're signing less than 20, you don't necessarily have room to maybe take a few of those kinds of chances. And I think Jaden Bradley's a really good wide receiver. I don't necessarily think of him as a big chance, but he's a guy who's played the position for 1 year. And when that's the case, you're going to be kind of raw. You're going to be unrefined. And you're going to need to be coached up. But you can take those kinds of guys when you've got some space in your class. So, I see that with Bradley. I see that with Trevor Gan Stevenson. I don't necessarily see it with Rodney Hammond and Miles Alston. I think those guys are legit. Nakai Johnson is legit. I think Terrence Rankle is a good prospect. Oh, and Javon McIntyre is the other one, a safety out of Imatep. And that's an important commitment. That was back in January when McIntyre committed. Imatep has been a big-time program in the state of Pennsylvania. They've produced really good players over the last 5-10 years. Pitt has never been able to really break in to Philadelphia as a whole. They've gotten a few guys here and there, but they haven't really been able to break in and get some of the premier prospects, and they really have not been able to break into Imatep Charter School or whatever it's called in Philly. Getting a guy out of there is a real reflection on the efforts of Corey Sanders, Pitt's safeties coach, who is tasked with doing Philadelphia and South Jersey for Pitt, and he has worked really hard for the last 2-3 years, however long he's been here. He's worked really hard to try and break in to Philadelphia and get a bit of a foothold for Pitt in Philadelphia. This year, finally, we're seeing it kind of pay off. Javon McIntyre is a big commitment in that regard, and he committed while he was on campus with 4 or 5 or 6 other kids from Imatep who have offers from Pitt. So just getting those guys to visit is a big step because kids from Imatep in the past didn't even visit. And then you get them to visit and you get a commitment. That was a win, obviously, for Pitt. And it was a big win for Corey Sanders. You're starting to see, and not even starting, this has been going on for a while. And if you follow Pitt recruiting, you've been seeing these trends going on at the same time. You're seeing with Chris Baty and Charlie Partridge, two excellent recruiters on this staff, two really big targets. Or two really big. Sorry, I got distracted looking at some of the comments. I'm going to get to the YouTube comments here in a second. Two really excellent recruiters in Chris Baty and Charlie Partridge, and you're seeing some other guys develop behind them. Corey Sanders is emerging as maybe the number 3 behind Partridge and Baty. I think Archie Collins, the cornerbacks coach who handles Ohio, he was main area recruiter for Terrence Rankle, who committed. Also handles some stuff in Georgia for Pitt. And kind of, other southeast areas other than Florida, if you get into Alabama or something like that. He's pretty good. I think Dave Borbley's good with offensive linemen. I think Andre Powell is pretty good with kids in Maryland. What you're seeing is this staff start to really elevate as a recruiting staff. The addition of Baty was huge last year. The addition of Charlie Partridge 3 years ago was huge. And then you're seeing these other guys as they further establish themselves. They've been around for a while. Archie Collins has been working for Pitt for 3 years or 2 years now, or whatever it's been. And he's establishing that foothold. Same thing with Corey Sanders. As these guys continue to get established, you're seeing more of the results. Now, Pitt obviously needs the results on the field. I think they've got the recruiting staff in place to do well, but at some point, just like I talked about with Jeff Capel, you need that synergy. You need the recruiting ability and the on-field results to happen at the same time. Because when you do, it blows up. And you want an example of that? Go back to the summer of 2010. Okay? Pitt's coming fresh off a 10-3 season where they finished ranked top 15, something like that. I forget where they ended up. So they're coming off a 10-3 season, and they've got a really good recruiting staff in place. And they go out and they're killing it that summer. And I mean, you can go and look at what those players ended up doing. Some of them had good college careers. Some of them didn't really do anything. But as recruits, and you look at as recruiting classes and the kind of recruiting battles they were winning, they were killing it on the recruiting trail. And that class ultimately fell apart. Not necessarily after Dave Wanstead got fired, but after Mike Haywood got fired, it really went in the pot. But you had a really good staff with on-field results. And when you put those two things together, you're going to have a lot of success in recruiting. You know where that goes. Got to win football games this year. You've got the recruiting staff in place. You've got to go out and win a lot. No more losing to Boston College and Miami. Don't lose to North Carolina. Don't blow any of these bad losses. Win what you're supposed to win. And if you do, you'll end up with 9 or 10 wins. And if you end up with 9 or 10 wins with this recruiting staff, the class of 2022 is going to be, one of Pitt's best. I mean, I'll write that down. I should write that down. Expect to see that in this week's 3-2-1 column on Panther-Lair.com. The 3-2-1 column we do every week. It's 3 observations, like 3 things we know, 2 questions we have, and then 1 prediction. It's gimmicky, but it's a chance to write about 6 different topics, although sometimes one topic will bleed over into 2 or 3 sections. But the prediction, I'm always like, what am I going to write? The predictions, I'm terrible at predictions. They always are wrong. Everything, I rarely ever get one of these predictions right. Well, expect this week's prediction to be, if they win 9 or 10 games in 2020, the 2022 recruiting class is going to be top 20 class. Yeah, I might write that. And the good thing about that, too, is that you'll forget by the time we get to December of 2022 or 2021 or whatever it is. You'll forget in the next year and a half that I wrote that. So I hope I don't forget that by the end of this podcast. That's a good prediction. All right, let's get to some of the comments here before we close up shop. Let's see. Looking at a few of the comments. I just want to roll back here. Let's see. Roman says, I would sacrifice my life to have this football season played. I need to see what this Pitt team can do. And you're absolutely right, Roman. We appreciate you checking in on the podcast, by the way. Another long-time guy, somebody who's been around since the beginning of our little YouTube experiment here. Yeah, it's it would be unfortunate to have a shortened or canceled season when Pitt has the best team it's had in 10 years. That would be something else. Leon Moore 23 says, got to keep Baty. He moves around a lot. He's moved around a little bit, but I think he seems pretty happy here. Josh Newark says, was Baty one of the coaches that was targeted by other schools this past offseason? I know most assumed it was Charlie, but was Baty another? Yeah, I think both of those coaches had some opportunities. Charlie Partridge and Chris Baty had some opportunities to go. And I think Pitt did what they needed to do to keep those guys in place. Nicholas Temperio says the recent football commits seem to have better offer sheets than their rankings would suggest. Yeah, somewhat. It's really unfortunate, when we talk about rankings, it's unfortunate that the spring prospect camps were canceled. The Rivals Camp Series, camps where they go around the country. It was going to be really be a chance for some of these guys to get seen by the Rivals analysts and potentially boost their rankings. And I think there was a chance for some of these guys to pull that off. Miles Alston, Rodney Hammond, I think could have gotten bumps. I think Javon McIntyre as well. Nakai Johnson's already a 4-star prospect, but I think he could have put on a show in those situations, in that kind of a setting at a camp. And so, as far as rankings go, it's unfortunate that those camps had to be canceled. I understand why, and I'm glad they were for safety reasons. But as far as rankings, I think, it's too bad because Pitt's recruits could have gotten a bump out of it. Jason Martell says a lot of projections have Pitt around 7-5. I think the defense is too good to let that happen. In year 2 in Whipple's system should see improvements. Admittedly, there are question marks on offense. Yeah, and that is a big question. Look, their offense was, plummet awful last year. And they've got all those players back, which it's good to have continuity, but if you have players back from a team that didn't play very well, is that a good thing? So it's going to be a matter of proving it. And when Pitt's offense proves it can be better, then they'll get more respect. But until they do that, until they prove it, nobody's going to buy in. Nobody's going to expect them to win 8 or 9 or 10 games until they break through. Let's see. What else we got? Colin Towell says, I think safety is a big need for this recruiting class for Pitt. Some good names in the Whippeal, like Derek Davis from Gateway and Donovan McMillan from Peters Township. I think also Stephon Hall from Central Valley's another one. They already have one safety committed in Javon McIntyre. I think they'll try and get a couple more, as well as a few cornerbacks. We always joke about Pat Narduzzi recruiting a lot of defensive backs, but I think this year's class is going to see a pretty big haul. Again, with a larger class, I think you're going to see a pretty big haul of defensive backs there. Let's see. Just a couple things. What else we got? Checking the comments. On to Green 19 says, don't forget Tim Salem in New Jersey. Yeah, Salem's done a good job recruiting out there in New Jersey. I know Tim Salem takes some guff from Pitt fans. They tend to give him a hard time sometimes, but I think the guy has done a good job. Look, not in tight end recruiting. Pitt's tight end recruiting has been a disaster. There's no explanation for it. I can't sit here and tell you why Pitt can't recruit a tight end to save its life. But I think when you look at Salem's efforts overall with the guys he's gone after, I think he's done a pretty good job. New Jersey has been his area, New England has been his area, and New York City. And I think Pitt has done well recruiting those areas with Tim Salem leading the charge. So he needs to get some tight ends. There's no question about that. But I think he's done well in the areas where he's been assigned. Let's see. Royce Beacom, sorry, but did you mention Adam Calteri in second season as recruiting director as a Western PA native? Adam Calteri is he's one of the recruiting assistants. I forget his exact title. You've got, Graham Wilbert and Carlo Zovko, and Adam Calteri is right there in that group. I forget if he's recruiting director. All these guys have all these different titles, but yeah, he's a Western PA guy. He's been around. He's sort of behind the scenes a little bit more. Mickey Jacobs is another guy, another recruiting assistant who's on the staff. A local guy who's done well. But yeah, Calteri is an interesting guy. Again, a little bit quiet, a little bit behind the scenes. You don't see him as active as much on social media, so the fans may not recognize that name as much. But he's I think he's an important part of the team there. I think they've, for as much as I talk about the coaches, I talk about Chris Baty and Charlie Partridge and Corey Sanders and all these different guys, Tim Salem, that recruiting staff, with Graham Wilbert and Carlo Zovko and Adam Calteri and Mickey Jacobs, and the host of interns and assistants and guys they have working there and girls they have working there. They've got a really strong recruiting staff between the coaches and the recruiting assistants. They've got a really strong recruiting staff. Now, of course, if you want to keep up on Pitt recruiting, the place that you need to go is Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com. And, of course, we have message boards where, for all the coverage we've had of William Jefferson committing and the 4 football recruits committing, we've also been discussing it at length on the message boards where we can talk all day, every day. This podcast, this live stream is 1 hour a week. The message boards are going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every week of the year. We're going nonstop on the message boards. And there's a lot of fun conversation happening there right now. When I get done with this podcast, I'm going to go back to the, I'm going to go back to the message boards and get back into the conversations. It's the best place to be. So if you're looking for good Pitt content, you're looking for good Pitt conversation, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Programming-wise, of course, we do this live stream every Tuesday night, 8:30 p.m. on Tuesdays. We release the podcast, which is an audio version of this live stream, on Wednesday mornings. We have the Friday Conversation podcast, where last week we had Tyler Palco. You should probably check that out because that was a lot of fun, that conversation with him. We had a good conversation with Tyler on the Friday podcast. And then Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on 93.7 The Fan, we have the Panthers Insider Show. So it's like this podcast, but just a radio show that you can listen to. All of this is a way to say that we've got a lot of Pitt content for you to check out at Panther-Lair.com, on YouTube, on podcast, on the website, on the radio. It's everywhere, man. It's everywhere. Shout out to Voodoo Brewery, Condescending Dough, Sour IPA, really good stuff. You like Pitt and you like beer, go get some Voodoo Brewery because you'll be supporting all of it at the same time. Other Pitt fans and really good beer. So I'm going to enjoy this. Thank you so much for tuning into the live stream tonight. Thanks for everybody who was in the comment section. It was fun talking to you guys again. We appreciate you listening to the podcast. And make sure you check out the site. We will catch up with you soon. Have a great week. Stay safe. Stay healthy.